cup of tea, candles lit. Guess we're doing the art journal. Hello and welcome back to the Shibaroo Studios YouTube channel. If you are new around here, my name is Jonathan. Here at Shibaroo Studios, I upload different videos every single week, all documenting my journey as I get back into art after a 10-year absence and try to turn my passion into a profession. We have weekly vlogs, we have weekly Draw This in Your Style challenge videos. We also have this video series in particular, which is the art journal, one of my favorite videos that we do, where we sit down, get the candles lit, have a nice wee cup of tea and talk about anything that's been happening in the week that's gone by, or any little subjects that I want to have a chat about. Generally, we start every single one of these videos with a little bit of a look at the artwork that I've created this week. So we're going to jump straight into it and talk about the first piece that I created since the last time we got together. So let's jump straight in with the first illustration that I produced since the last time we got together. And both of the pieces that I'm going to be talking about today actually came from a trend over on Instagram, which is known as, I believe the proper title is the Forest Emoji Art, I think is the hashtag that goes along for it. But the general idea is there are 4 separate illustrations that are being produced by any of the illustrators taking part, where there is 3 particular emojis that are used, and they are to act as prompts for what you're actually going to include in your piece of artwork. So for this first one that I drew, the prompts I believe were a bird, a bicycle and a sunflower. So I just thought that what I would like to do is have a bird sitting on a bike with a little basket at the front with sunflowers in it. With the illustrations, and I've mentioned it before, I think I talked about it in one of the Draw This in Your Style challenge videos. One of the things that I like to do with these challenges is use it as a bit of an opportunity to experiment. As I've mentioned throughout quite a lot of the videos and the content that we've been doing, I only got back into any kind of art from December. So I spent a lot of those early days just trying to get back into my own little creative groove, and to also then try and understand the mechanisms and the workings of digital illustration and how I could take any of my prior existing knowledge and apply it to a digital medium. So I do feel that now, heading into February, I'm beginning to get a little bit more comfortable with the software, the programs. I'm beginning to learn a little bit more about how to do the things that I have in my head on the screen. And so little things like this, I always think, right, let's try and take what we already have and push it a little bit further. So in this illustration, there were quite a lot of the hallmark things that I've put into a lot of the previous illustrations that I've done. If you're familiar with any of the work that I've been uploading, the little hill that the characters sit on has been a little bit of a hallmark that I've been using for a lot of my pieces, particularly my environmental sketches of actually both of these pieces on the wall behind me feature that. The particular type of the tree that's used at either side of it is also featured here on my Armagh Rhymers piece that I included here in the bird illustration. What I tried to do with these ones was push those ideas to what I felt was the next level for them. The grass hill, for example, I focused a lot more on the texturing of the hill itself. I thought it would give it a little bit more character, a little bit more depth. It would just make it stand out a little bit more. In my previous illustrations, I had actually tried to illustrate little blades of grass at the top of the hills, which I did think worked well, but ultimately when I went for a kind of cross-hatched shading, well, it's almost not even shading. Cross-hatching would obviously be a technique that you would traditionally use for shading in an illustration. For me, I've actually just used it more as a texturing piece for the grass in this illustration. As well as that, I kind of used a similar idea with almost scaling in the trees itself. The trees are something that I've illustrated in many different pieces. It's just a very fun, playful children's picture book style tree, and I would add in the little leaves. I often tried to add leaves here and there and have them in like a kind of love heart shape, because I just thought it added a little bit more detail, but it also was very in keeping with the general style of illustration that I was doing. With this, adding the additional scaling to the tree, I think just give a little bit more character to the pieces. And for me, this wasn't a million miles away from a lot of the stuff that I've been illustrating, but it's just you taking those small little steps to basically advance the aesthetic that you have in your work. I think the biggest jump that I took forward in this one was actually the inclusion of the sky behind it. I'd worked a few times where I'd included sky in illustrations in the past, but it was something that I just always felt that the illustrations that I created and the sky in them always seemed like two completely different elements that didn't belong together. And I was struggling to find a way to properly have a sky in my environments that fit in with any of the things that I was illustrating in the foreground of my pieces. So I tried a couple of different things, and ultimately it should have been the most obvious thing. Simplicity actually worked better because of the particular aesthetic and illustration style that I go for. Just simple blue with the white clouds, some of them slightly more transparent than others. That did the job. I was previously trying to be, I think, a little bit more elaborate. I tried to add in more shading in the sky, having the sky be more of a gradient as it reached the horizon line of the piece, but it never looked right. It was distracting from the actual subject matter of the illustrations, so I was just not using it at all. Any of these illustrations that I have in the back, and you can go over and check the full resolution versions of them over on my Instagram page, they don't include the sky because I just couldn't get it to work properly. However, this illustration, I actually think the sky and it really enhances the piece. It makes it feel like a more complete piece. I did create an alternative version that was more in keeping with my previous illustrations that didn't include it, but once I feel like I finally kind of got the particular style that fit with my work, there was no going back. I couldn't go back to not including it because it seemed almost an incomplete piece now without it. Ultimately though, I was really happy with his illustration. It was a fun little exercise. I had a great time doing it and I was really happy with the outcome. Although when I move on to my second illustration in this Forest Emoji Art trend over on Instagram, I knew that I wanted to try something very different and a little bit out of my comfort zone. I am so pleased with the outcome of this piece. I had the idea initially that I knew with a fox is flying a kite, I wanted to do a dad and a son fox together. I knew I wanted to create that scene. I think with the style of illustration that you're doing, having that little dynamic and showing that bond of father and son, it's very in keeping, it's very heartwarming, it fits in with the style. But I did want to do this full scene of kind of the idea of rolling fields going back in a countryside, and I knew that it was going to be more consuming of the time that I put into the illustrations because it was going to have more detail. It was going to push me in directions that I wanted to take my work, but I was going to have to learn little things along the way, make mistakes along the way to figure out how to produce what I had in my head. And I also wanted to change up some of the stuff, like the trees that I include in this. I did stick in two of the kind of hallmark trees that I had been illustrating, but I knew I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'd seen different trees that people had illustrated in their own work, and every time I seen them I thought, oh, I love that idea, I want to kind of do that myself, I want to do my own version of that. And I wanted to include those trees, which you can see in the foreground of the piece and heading off into the background. I wanted to experiment a lot more with my color palette. I wanted to make it more sort of tonal, having different variations of shades to give that idea of depth. I wanted to take the texturing that I talked about in my previous piece, the bird piece that I did in the grass, and take that to another level where I really pushed the texture that I brought into the piece. But the main thing is I wanted to ensure that I kept the same feeling, the same energy that I have in all my previous illustrations. It just, to me, this one had to be an evolution of my illustration style. And I was so happy. Like I love the outcome of this. I think as you begin doing any kind of illustration, particularly if you're doing something that is a little bit out of your comfort zone, a little bit different, initially it's a little bit intimidating, not only because you're kind of venturing into the unknown, but like I didn't really know how to achieve some of the effects that I managed to get in the final piece of this, and I had to just do a trial and error. I tried with the hills as I went into the backgrounds. I tried so many different color variations because some, just the way the shades worked in between the different fields that I'd illustrated just didn't look right. The colors didn't quite fit. And the trees, I had to play around with doing this new illustration of a different type of tree that could also sit alongside the ones that I've kind of been doing in all my other illustrations. I wanted it to be an extension of, I kind of think of like I have my little tree family that I'm growing. These are the illustrations of trees that I include in so many of my pieces, and I'm just adding another member of that family. So it has to be individual, it has to be distinct, it has to have its own character, its own personality, but it also should be able to sit alongside the other illustrations of trees that I do and not look out of place and not look like this is something that belongs in a completely different piece of artwork. So I played around with that for quite a bit, and I was quite happy with the outcome. I make sure to kind of place some of them close enough together just to prove, I think, to myself that they could sit together in the same piece and not look out of place. And yeah, I had so much fun with this piece. I actually have a time-lapse image of my illustration of the entire piece. And the foxes themselves, I'm really happy with how they sit in the final illustration. You know, I was really, really pleased with them. Obviously, I drew them a lot larger and a lot more detailed, and as you kind of scale it down to fit into the overall final piece, I do think that you kind of lose a few details here and there. So I am going to be uploading the time-lapse so that you can get a better look at just the different details and the shading that went into the pieces. But one of the most interesting things about this piece is I tried a completely different illustration style. I've been working with the same illustration style since I began, which it's an illustration style that involves painting. Like, I would do my initial sketch, I would paint large areas of color over that sketch and then use the rubber to remove the areas that I didn't need to cut it down to the shape that I was using. For example, if I was painting a house, I would have my illustration of the house. I would then paint right over the top of that whole thing, going right outside the lines, and then cut all of the unnecessary areas back with the rubber and just remove it till I had the little shape and silhouette that I needed. From there, I would, you know, texture and render shadows and highlights into it. With this piece, I took a very different approach, and I tried to stick very much inside the lines to actually just work the colors into the shapes that I needed, and from there add in my texturing. I do feel that that was I kind of think that it took a little bit of getting used to, but once I did get used to it, I think it was a lot more, there was so much more flow to my work. Having to go back and obviously remove all the areas that you didn't need, it's very time consuming, and it also takes you out of the flow of when you're thinking about, okay, I want this, you know, object to be here and this color to be up against the background of this color. When you're having to stop to remove those areas, you're kind of taking that creative flow and that creative process in your mind and you're disrupting it. So I always kind of felt in my previous illustration style that I've been using up until this point, it was very stop-start. Whereas this one, I felt once I got going and got into the rhythm of it, things were just coming together a lot easier. I think if I tried to create this piece in my previous illustration style that I was using, I wouldn't have it done in, like, it would take so much longer, 3-4 times as long, particularly with something that includes the amount of detail that I tried to include in this. But I mean, that's one of the most important things, I think, when you're getting into any kind of different medium in terms of the artwork that you create. You do start off a little bit tentatively, and the technique that you use probably isn't the most effective and time efficient techniques, and you do have to kind of evolve that and develop it. And I think it comes with practice, it comes with confidence. But yeah, I was so happy with the final outcome of this piece, and I just loved it. I can't wait to get started into the next illustration that will be coming up. Hopefully we'll have that posted up by the weekend, and next week when we sit down for our little art journal video, we'll be able to talk a lot more about that. But before we get into the final part of our video where we sit down and talk a little bit about whatever's been going on in my mind, I'm going to cut to a quick little time lapse of me creating these pieces. I'll put up the time lapse of the fox illustration so you can get a little bit of a look at the process that I've been discussing here. And then once that's finished, we'll sit back down and I'll talk a little bit to you about what's been going through my head for the last couple of days. go. That was my illustration process for these pieces. You can probably see the differentiations between the two illustration techniques that I used, but I think I've talked quite enough about them. Really hope you enjoyed the work, really hope you enjoyed the illustrations. There'll be plenty more coming. As I always say, my Instagram account is linked below. All of the work goes up on there first, so do get over there, do subscribe to the account and follow me over there. You'll be the first person to see everything we put up. But now for the final part of our art journal video. I always like to close out these videos by talking about a certain subject that's been on my mind. And as I've mentioned in previous vlogs, if you've been keeping up with it, or we had posts about it over on the Instagram page, I had the opportunity this week to go to the City of Armagh High School. It is a secondary school here in the city where I'm from. And I was just invited and given the opportunity to go and speak to a lot of their GCSE and Year 10 students about art, about creativity, about digital illustration and myself. And this was an opportunity that arose from me doing my interview with Armagh. I was invited by the art teacher over at the school, and I kind of knew as soon as I was given the invitation that it was something that I jumped at, something I absolutely was so excited to do. As I kind of got closer and closer to the date, I began to realize the kind of enormity and the responsibility that doing something like that entails. And obviously I'd never done anything like this, public speaking to a group of, I believe it was 38 or 39 students in the end. But I really wanted to talk about the experience because I kind of felt this is the first time I'm ever doing anything like this. And I certainly want to have more opportunities to do similar things, and we'll get to that towards the end of the video. But I thought if this is my one opportunity to speak to these young adults and to impart something to them that I would hope stays with them, the one thing above anything else that I want to do is be an advocate for creativity and be an advocate for self-expression. And I really wanted to push to these young adults that art, in whatever form it might be, whether it's illustration, painting, music, poetry, writing, whatever it might be, I feel that it is an absolutely necessary and vital thing for your life, for you to be a healthy, functioning person. It's a tremendous thing for your mental health. It's something that we've talked about here on the channel before. It was a big proponent of just my general story about why I got into this in the first place. And so I spent a lot of time speaking to these students about it, and it was one of the things that I kind of seen a few of them, their heads and they kind of pricked up, their attention was caught whenever I began to talk about it. And I mean, that's not surprising to me because I know we grow up in a very world that can be difficult at times. We grow up in a world where it takes bravery and it takes courage to express yourself. Particularly if you're a creative, particularly if you're an artist or a writer, or if you are involved in the arts in any medium whatsoever, whenever you put your work out there in the world, really what you're doing is you're taking a little bit of you, something personal to you, something that for some of us can be private, and you're putting it out into the world for other people to see. And when people see what you make, naturally they make judgments about it. And I think everybody knows and everybody's aware that if you're creating something in the world, it's not going to be something for everyone. It's not going to be something that people like. And as much as you have the right to self-expression, people have the right to make up their opinions on it about whether they like it, whether they don't like it, whether it is something that they just love and adore and that changes their life, or something that they absolutely detest and it brings anger and whatever it might be to people. But that is entirely their right, and you need to, first of all, you need to have an understanding of that. You need to be able to be comfortable and confident enough in yourself that you're prepared for whatever it is that the world gives back to you when you put a little bit of your heart and your soul into it. And when I've spoken to these students, I loved how engaged they were. I loved how, they were asking me questions. You could see them really concentrating and listening to what it was that I was saying, which, I mean, that's an incredibly humbling thing. As I've mentioned so many times, I'm so early in this journey that I've been taking, but already I've had so many wonderful opportunities. I would definitely include what I did speaking to these students as the most wonderful thing I've had the opportunity to do so far, the most fulfilling. And there is an almost cliched thing that I think so many people have heard over the years, where someone who, whatever it is that a person might be doing, they'll say, I'll do this thing, and if I can just bring change to one person, then it's all worth it. And there's a reason that that's a cliche. There's a reason that you've heard it 100 times, because it's true. It is completely genuine. And when I finished doing the talk to the students that I got the privilege to speak to, there was one student in particular that stayed behind and came up to me afterwards and asked if they could speak to me. I said, of course, yeah, absolutely. And she asked a few questions about some of the topics that I touched on in my talk, but she had talked about the fact that I had mentioned in my story, which, if you're not aware of it by now, go watch the very first video we ever uploaded on the channel here. I talk about how I went away from art for 10 years because of my own self-confidence issues, anxieties, and so on. And she shared with me that she hadn't been practicing her own art for quite a while. She had a particular illustration style that she was drawn to, and showed me, examples of what it was. And I thought it was so ironic, because it's very much the style of art and illustration that I would have been doing when I was her age, doing GCSE level art. And she said that she had kind of fallen away from it. And when I talked about that happening to me, it kind of resonated with her. And for me, I can't say exactly where it came from that person. But what I kind of inferred from the conversation that we had is this was a young person who just needed some encouragement to get back into it. And I know what that feels like. I've been in that situation before. So, I took the time, I chatted away to her. And the fact that after we had our talk, she actually said that she was going to go and pick up a pencil again and go back into producing these illustrations. And legitimately, that was, for me, just an incredibly overwhelming thing to experience. Like, it is that adage, if you can make that change to one person, everything's worth it. And again, I keep hammering home this point. I said it to those students when I'm speaking to them. I said it in my interview with RMI. I think I've made mention of it here on the channel a few times. I've been going on this journey. I've been uploading this content here on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere else. And one of the things that I always wanted to get across is I don't have anything in myself that's any different than anybody else. That means that I can go on this journey and nobody else can. It's absolutely not the message I wanted to get across. I wanted to say, every single person has something in themselves that's beautiful, that's wonderful, that can elicit change in the world that we live in. One of the quotes that I always use, and I believe it was a quote from Neil Gaiman, and it always stuck with me. I used it in my speech. There is no one in the world who can say what you have to say in the way that you can say it. And it was just incredible. The experience that I had, I wouldn't have anticipated that happening. I wouldn't have anticipated my kind of emotional response to it. It really, really did hit home. And it's a feeling that I really wasn't prepared for. I don't really know if you ever could be prepared for it if you've never experienced it before. But it was just wonderful. And it's the main thing I wanted to talk about today, because I think being involved in a creative thing is wonderful. And it's a wonderful thing for yourself. It's tremendous to be able to take everything that you have in your head and your heart and your soul and put it out into the world and share it and just to express it. But when you can do that and you can actually elicit a positive change in people, it's just incredible. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about this week. It's been a wild, wild week, and one filled with so many highs. And this is something that I had the great fortune to be given this opportunity, and it's something that I definitely want to look into further. Doing these talks in schools is something that I absolutely want to pursue, and I want it to be part of the journey that we have going forward. I did learn from the teacher who had invited me in the first place that it's actually part of a GCSE curriculum to have their students interacting and engaging with artists from the local community and doing workshops with them. So it's definitely something I'm going to be looking into as I'm moving forward. But the main thing, like, I wanted to talk about it in the video because anybody who does watch it and anybody who does see the content that I'm creating here, who is also a creator, who's also an artist, who's also an illustrator, just remember that what you're doing isn't just, you're not just doodling on a piece of paper, you're putting stuff out into that world that can really have a positive effect on people. And it's the greatest thing you can do. The world that we live in has been shaped, and always has been and always will be, by artists and creatives who have, since the very beginning of time, pointed humanity in the direction that it's always going to. They're the shapers of society, the sculptors of the world that we live in, and they always will be. And if you're someone who is involved in any kind of creativity, in any kind of arts whatsoever, just remember that that's what you're doing. You're literally making the world a better place and pointing it in the direction that it's meant to be going in. So I have had a wonderful time sitting down to talk to you guys again today. I always do, every single week. There will be a little bit more content in regards to me doing my talk at the City of Armagh High School in the weekly vlog, which will get uploaded on Sunday. So obviously make sure you're subscribing to the channel. The button's right down there, just click it, you can do it, it's good. And just before I go, I should have mentioned at the head of this video, normally our art journal video actually went live on Mondays, the day after the vlog went live. Today we're doing it on Wednesday. Now initially that was just because, you know, I was doing the talk to those students on the Monday where typically I'd be recording this video, but I did also figure out that I think having a video go up on a Sunday quite late in the evening and then having a video going up relatively, you know, midday on a Monday, the content's too close together. I feel that it's actually hurting the amount of views that I could get onto those pieces. And so I think I readjusted the schedule last week. I think I'm going to be readjusting it to now vlog going up on a Sunday, art journal going up on a Wednesday, draw this in your style going up on a Friday. I think that's going to be the way going forward. But as I said, still very early days in all of this. I've pulled the tag off my tea. My tea bag's just fallen into my cup. It's cold. I've rambled on this video so long that my tea's cold anyway. But anyway, look, I've had a great time. Like, share, subscribe. We'll definitely have a vlog going up on Sunday. Hopefully we have a draw this in your style going up on Friday. But I've 2 commission pieces to get done, so we'll see how it goes. But make sure you're keeping an eye on it. We'll have plenty more content anyway in the future, and I look forward to seeing you, ? Next time, whenever that is.